return of Shadow. In the quaint town of Green Hollow, the Miller family lived in a cozy, old-fashioned house surrounded by thick woods. Their beloved black Labrador Shadow was a constant companion, always eager to play with the children, Emma and Jack. One fateful autumn evening, Shadow vanished without a trace. The family searched everywhere, but Shadow was gone. A year passed, and the Miller family had almost given up hope. Life continued, but there was always a shadow of sorrow. One stormy night, as lightning crackled across the sky, there was a loud scratching at the front door. Mr. Miller cautiously opened it, and there stood Shadow, drenched and shivering but unmistakably their dog. The family rejoiced, showering him with affection and relief. But Shadow had changed. His once bright eyes were now a deep, unsettling red, and he seemed to avoid the family's gaze. At first, the Millers attributed his odd behavior to trauma from being lost for so long. However, as days turned into weeks, Shadow's actions grew more disturbing. Shadow began to exhibit strange behaviors. He would stand in the middle of the living room, staring intently at the walls, growling softly. He no longer responded to his name or commands, and the children noticed that his once playful demeanor had turned aggressive. Emma and Jack swore they saw him sneaking into their rooms at night, standing by their beds, watching them sleep. One evening, Mrs. Miller decided to bathe Shadow, hoping it would comfort him. As she scrubbed his fur, she noticed a peculiar symbol branded on his belly. It was an ancient rune, something she had never seen before. Fear gripped her heart as she realized this was no ordinary mark. Desperate for answers, the Millers consulted an old family friend, Father O'Ailey, who was well-versed in ancient lore. Upon seeing the rune, Father O'Ailey's face paled. He revealed that the symbol was a mark of possession, indicating that a demonic entity had taken hold of Shadow. Terrified, the family agreed to an exorcism. Father O'Ailey arrived with holy water, a crucifix, and a sacred tome. As he began the ritual, Shadow's demeanor transformed. He snarled and snapped, his body convulsing violently. The room grew cold, and the lights flickered as an unearthly growl echoed through the house. Father O'Ailey chanted louder, splashing holy water onto Shadow. The dog writhed in agony, his eyes glowing a sinister red. Suddenly, Shadow let out a blood-curdling howl, and the room was engulfed in darkness. When the lights returned, Shadow lay motionless on the floor, the demonic glow in his eyes extinguished. The Millers wept as Father O'Ailey pronounced the exorcism successful. Shadow had been freed from the malevolent entity, but the toll on his body was too great. They buried him in the backyard, under his favorite oak tree, and tried to move on with their lives. But Green Hollow was never the same. The Millers often heard distant howls at night, and the townspeople spoke in hushed tones about the haunting presence in the woods. The once joyful laughter of Emma and Jack was now tinged with sorrow, and the family could never forget the chilling events that followed Shadow's return. Years later, as Emma and Jack grew older, they often found themselves drawn to the oak tree where Shadow was buried, and sometimes late at night they swore they could see a pair of red eyes watching them from the darkness, a reminder of the demonic force that had once invaded their home.
Back when I was in high school, my best friend and I would pretty much stick to hanging out at school because her dad was the warden at the local prison, and their house was just a hop, skip, and a jump away, barely half a mile. But her mom, let's just say she had this vibe that made me think twice about visiting. She was definitely not someone you'd want to mess with. Anyway, one day my friend drops this bombshell on me about her mom. So apparently the night before, her mom rolls in looking pale as a ghost. Turns out when she and her buddies were leaving the grocery store, they spotted someone chilling in the back seat of her car. At first she thought it was my friend, her daughter, but as they got closer, they realized it was actually some elderly woman. Her mom starts making her way to the car, but her friends are like, hold up, it's probably just someone from the assisted living center bus. They insisted on calling the cops, and bam, within minutes the cops are there because they're basically right around the corner. So her mom points out her car, and one of the cops does the whole routine, pulls the person out, slams them against the car, and starts patting them down, Her mom's freaking out until they yank off the person's wig, and lo and behold, it's a dude. She was so relieved, 'cause if it weren't for her friends, she might have offered the stranger a ride home.
Whispers of the past. James moved back into his childhood home and stumbled upon an old drawing of himself with his imaginary friend Tommy. Nostalgic, he muttered, "Tommy, are you still there that night?" Whispers haunted his sleep, calling him to play again. The next day, James brushed it off as a bad dream. But the whispers grew persistent and memories of Tommy's dark games resurfaced. Desperate to end the torment, James confronted his fears and summoned Tommy. The room grew cold, and shadows formed into the sinister figure of Tommy, now revealed as a demon. "You summoned me," Tommy hissed. "You freed me." James realized Tommy had been waiting for this moment. "Why now?" he asked. "Because you called me." "Now we can play forever," Tommy replied, stepping closer. Trapped by shadows, James scratched symbols into the floor, hoping to banish the demon. Tommy laughed. "Those are my symbols. You strengthen my hold." In desperation, James carved a symbol into his skin, recalling it from a childhood nightmare. Light burst from the wound, and Tommy screamed, dissolving into the shadows. Exhausted and bleeding, James knew Tommy would always be lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness. As he lay on the floor, he realized the horrors of his childhood had never left. They had been biding their time in the shadows.